I finally got my copy of the big box of Pursuit of Happiness. Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and you're watching The Broken Meeple. This is a YouTube channel about board games where I give reviews, top 10s and my honest opinions, regardless of the consequences.
Get on with it.
So hopefully you checked out the other video where I talk about the Pursuit of Happiness big box in general, this huge monstrosity here, and how it does a great job of storing all the content providing you have all the content. Now I'm going to talk specifically about the newest expansion, Nostalgia, that came with this in the recent Kickstarter. This is now the third big box expansion for Pursuit of Happiness, and if you look at their Kickstarter page or check out the history on my channel, you will see videos that I have done on Pursuit of Happiness, including a comprehensive guide to all the other expansions in the past. Not one of my best visual videos, shall we say, but I feel it's very informative and did a good job for the Kickstarter, so by all means check that out if you want to know about the rest of Pursuit of Happiness as a whole. Here though, as you can see, there's not a huge amount in the Nostalgia expansion component-wise, but what this expansion is essentially doing is adding a lot more options, but for experienced players. And even the rulebook goes into, a sentence here saying, "Expansion has been designed with experienced players in mind and makes the game a bit more challenging. If you have not played before, we suggest you play a few games first, just with the base game to become familiar." And yeah, it's kind of correct in that. More on that in a second. So essentially what you have is that each player has their own little Nostalgia board, which is basically a spot for 2 cards to go down, and everybody is dealt 8 cards from this whopping great big deck of Nostalgia cards before the game even starts. So even before you even know what's on the board, you get these 8 cards and you get a chance to look through them all. No discarding, no nothing, you get all these 8 cards. These Nostalgia cards are basically meant to represent intrinsic aspirations or childhood memories that you might have had. So, you might have really had aspirations to become an air racing pilot, or become a really good archer, or be a really good baker. But then, you might just, as a child, be career-minded, or, some down here, family gatherings and tidying up your room, apparently, and stuff. Those would be nostalgic childhood memories. But the idea with these is that they function in a similar way to projects in a sense where you pay the cost, get the reward. But what happens is you now have the option to fulfill these during the game, and they have multiple different ways that they will flip and give you special bonuses or abilities. So the idea is that during your turn, you may at any point place down a card on the slot for your Nostalgia board, and you can have 2 in play at any one time. So let's take Animal Welfare and an Air Racing Pilot, for example. And then each of them has a trigger or 2. The idea being that one of them is a passive trigger, which means as soon as you do some other action or something else on the board, it triggers and it goes off and you get the reward. The other one, at any point on your turn, before your action, or after I believe, you can basically pay the cost and do the other one. So these don't actually take hourglasses to do, you simply do them as part of your turn. So for example, Air Racing Pilot, right? Flight simulation game, perform the play action. Get books. Okay, great. So I just do the play action and that's that trigger done. The other one, pay a cost and 1 coin, attend an air show. Okay, that's the 2 triggers done. Then what you can do is you have another card action to basically flip the card and reminiscence over it. So usually they have a cost, but they also may have a passive trigger, passive requirement. So here, have at least $7 and free creativity. Go to aerobatic flight school, and then you get the reward. And then the card flips, and then it goes off your board, so it frees up the slot because you do have 8 of them after all. But it essentially now gives you one of 4 different varieties of cards now. So when you flip these over, they can be one of 4 things. As I say, they can be a life goal kind of in-game scoring ability. So this one, for example, when I pay a level 3 job's upkeep, I put a cube on the card, and at the end of the game, the more cubes that there are, the more points that there are. I'm a career-minded individual. Well, that fits. But then you've also got potential abilities that go off. So here you can level it up to another level by mastering the art of calligraphy, but then at the end of the action phase gain a creativity. There could be another one that says here, once per round gain a point if you pay at least 5 books in a single action. Stuff like that. Basically, ongoing abilities for the game. So we've got end of game scoring, ongoing abilities. We then also have essentially kind of like what look like projects for the most part. Here I've got beekeeping, which essentially allows you to, level up this in the same way that you kind of level up a normal project. And then once you get to the end, you can basically, do the very end bit, and it's again cost and reward. So they're basically like, further projects, but they're cool projects, and you can also repeat the last bit. So once you've got it up to that level, I've got beekeeping supplies. I select a hive, I gather the bees, and then I can constantly, as many times as I want to do the action, sweet, sweet honey. Works with beekeeping. And then I got an example here. Yep, archery, this archery card. You can level it up, and then once you level it up to the end, you have 2 outcomes that you pick when you do an outcome action, effectively, again, using an hourglass. So I practice for a competition. Did I get second or first? That's up to me. So you've got 4 different types of cards that these can flip into, and this is in addition to what else you're doing in the game. Everything else is unchanged. The idea being, though, is that you have these little check marks to basically track whether you've done the triggers on them or not, so you can just sort of keep tabs. But the main idea is that these are in addition to the projects and the items and everything, and you have your own little board in order to use these up. Now, what this kind of does is twofold. Firstly, this gives you a lot of options in the game. A lot more options, because on top of everything else you're seeing on the board, you now have these 8 cards to look at, in which you're looking at all the fronts of them and all the backs to kind of gauge, okay, is this something I could really do with, at any one point? And you get to look at these before the game starts. So options, boom, yeah, they've gone through the roof as per usual with this game. But what it also does is adds a bit of extra complexity. The book does say you want to be experienced with this game first, and never truer has a word been spoken. This is definitely one for the expert pursuit of happiness players. It's not that the rules are complicated, but you need to understand how the 4 different types of realization cards work, which is more rules to to deal with. And there's no reference card to explain these in the box, which is a bit of an oversight. I feel like there could have been another one of those help cards that you could have had for each player to go over the different types of actions that this has. That's a little bit of a letdown, but you do only have, a couple of pages that are relevant for the rules for this expansion. And that there's a huge amount to read, but still, a reference card would be nice. I keep talking about this sort of thing. It's a good thing in games. But what this can have the effect of doing is causing a bit more analysis paralysis with players. If you get the slow player who at the start of the game has to really study all 8 of these cards, and then as they're deciding what to do next on their turn, they're then picking up the nostalgia deck and looking at them again to see, which one is this one? You get the slow player in this game. It won't be the pursuit of happiness. It will be the pursuit of that slow pair as I chase them across the estate with a chainsaw.
That escalated quickly.
At no point should you put this in front of any new player to Pursuit of Happiness or anyone remotely AP prevalent. This is definitely for those who are fluent with Pursuit of Happiness and know what they are doing. This is a given. Do not teach any new player this. It's just too much on top of it. Now, with that said and done, with those slight negatives, is it fun to play? Yes. Generally it is. It's not something that blows my mind. This isn't gonna suddenly be like an essential must-buy for the game. It's just another good expansion that adds more cool stuff that you can do and a nice thematic touch. I mean, these are really quite thematic. I mean, a healthy lifestyle, happily ever after, everlasting love, and some of these abilities aren't just simply pay a cost in resources and get some resources and points. There are some interesting, sort of different types of varieties in the triggers you have to do, but also the outcomes that you can get. The abilities can give you some really cool special powers. Once per round during the upkeep phase, you can play money to get some influence, always handy. But a lot of these, will have some interesting endgame scoring. Again, endgame scoring can be a really good thing, because you look at these at the start of the game and you think, well, if I grab that one and fulfill that, then I get scoring for really high-end job. Right, I better make sure and I get a really good high-end job this game. It gives you something else to aim for. Of course, that does introduce a bit of an RNG random element in the game, that if the life goals kind of gel with the nostalgia cards you've got for some scoring, that can kind of put a little bit of too much favor on you, but it's not too bad. But I like some of these projects where, Everlasting Love is probably one of my favorite ones in here. So you visit the lake. Is that really you? And then you buy the proposal ring. And then when you flip it over, buy the proposal ring, let's go for a trip. And then the outcome is to take a partner at level 2 or 3, depending on which way you do. Like, let's take it slow, or I do. So it's just a cool little, thematic touch to this game, and this game is already really good on the thematic side. Now, a problem I've had with the other 2 expansions is that they do add some extra game length, because in the community expansion, which I still think is the best of the 3, you have this Meeple and it gives you effectively another action a turn. In Dreams, you also had the experiences and you had this cloud that you could do stuff a turn. I said it in those games, I said it in Meadow, if you remember the river expansion that I did a video on. Adding more actions around just makes the game longer, and that doesn't necessarily make the game better. In fact, most of the time it makes the game worse if you make the game longer. Now, with Nostalgia, it's slightly different. Yes, you do have a couple of free actions that you can do each round, but that's mainly just for triggering these 2 bits on the card. That's it. They're not particularly long. I mean, one of them just happens when you're doing your turn as normal, and the other one is just simply, right, well, I'll make this cost and I'll get this reward. Right, it's now ready to flip as a normal action of the game. The actions that you do on this card, whether it's flipping the card over from reminiscence to realization, and then doing whatever you want to do on the realization side, are all done with your normal hourglasses, which means that it doesn't add additional length to the game other than the computational part of people thinking about what to do with their 8 cards as well as everything on the board. Components wise, you don't get a ton in the box. I mean, you do get a decent amount of cards. These are all sleeved and you're going to get 8 of them every game, but there's still quite a few of them there to keep people interested from different games. Aside from that though, you just get 4 little checkmark tokens each, and these little boards, which are a nice little touch. I mean, you don't need a board to tell you where to put 2 cards, but at least it separates it from the rest of your, your card tableau. But I do like the fact that they're basically drawn out like a kid's notebook. So as I look at this one, I can see like the happy face and some letters, drawing a little plane, little bug. Somebody's drawn some fishies and flowers on there. There's a little like typical like little girl, lollipop, ice cream. They've just got nice little touches there to bring out that theme and to make it seem like this is something that you would have done while you were a child. Like as a child, I'm doodling in my notebook, I'm bored listening to the teacher talk about, physics or whatever, or in my case, probably Pride and Prejudice, and you're just doodling in your book and you're thinking, someday I'll be an astronaut. And that's just a cool little touch. You can tell even more stories than you could before with this added in, and it's definitely a fun way to play. So overall, the Nostalgia expansion is probably my second favorite of the lot. Community is still my favorite. I think the theme and the mechanics of the Community expansion work really well, offering me a new cool way to play the game, whether I do a little bit of Community or focus entirely on it. I just think that one is quite a good fun expansion, even though it does elongate the timer of the game a bit, which is a negative. This one is easily the second favorite though. I think that the fact that it doesn't add much additional length to the game at all is a good solid part of this. The downside is the fact that this is pretty much one I will only bring out with those who know how to play Pursuit of Happiness, don't need a rules teach, and simply just need to know how this expansion works, which does limit how often I'm going to get this out. However, you can use these in solo mode, and all you do is simply add to the amount of long-term happiness you need to win the game. Other than that, you have 8 cards and you can do all sorts with them. So honestly, if anything, this is better as a solo expansion than it is a multiplayer one. But it is still fun to use in multiplayer if you are all familiar with Pursuit and you want a little bit of extra options to deal with. Experiences is still my I think it's Experiences? Yeah, I think that's the name of the expansion. That is still my least favorite of them. It's not a bad expansion, but I just think that the Dreams mechanic in it is fine. The Experiences cards are just not that interesting compared to, say, the Community and these ones. But as I say, all 3 of the expansions are still good fun to use, although under no circumstances am I likely to ever want to use all 3 at once. That would be a little bit insane. With this one, I would say that you probably want to use this as a base plus Nostalgia only, if you want to just add more options but not elongate the length of the game. But if you're particularly fluent in the game, then perhaps you could throw this in along with Community, and that would be my favourite way. I think adding Experiences and Dreams on top of that is probably just a little bit too much and unnecessary. And of course, you've got all those other mini modules to throw in, like pets and kids and that anyway, so it's not like you're short of content in this game. So with all that said, I'm giving Nostalgia an 8 out of 10. This is a great expansion, but I do stand with the caveat that this is best suited to experienced players and not one for casual players at all. If you're teaching this on a regular basis, or you know people that are a little bit slower to deal with loads of options and things like that, I think this expansion will be one step too far. And I certainly still don't recommend that you throw this into a teaching game of Pursuit ever. Maybe if only one player is learning the game and you know that they're comfortable with heavy euros and stuff, then great. But if you're trying to teach relatively new gamers this or light gamers this and you've got at least 2 in the party, you might want to reconsider and just stick with the base game. I mean, to be honest, I usually stick with the base game with 4 players anyway, just because that's quite a lot of players to have in the game. But solo, I'll throw this in with community and I'll have a blast. So it is definitely a solid expansion, just not essential, and certainly mainly for the experienced. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube, but also thumb it up on Board Game Geek. Let's get it in the hot review section and get this channel more noticed, particularly at this point where, as I record this video, I am just crawling and scraping towards the 20,000 subscriber mark. I've got a cool surprise for everybody who views the channel when I get to 20,000, so by all means, please help this channel to reach that milestone. But if you want to check out more content on the channel, then by all means, check out the big box review that I've also done for the box container as a whole, and the Rome in the Day and Phantom Ink reviews I did a couple of weeks ago before I was ill, where I talk about the new upcoming releases from Alley Cat Games at the UK Games Expo. So take care, and remember, regardless of how you want to reminisce over your nostalgia, it's still only a game. Bye for now, everyone.